Good evening, class. Today I will be discussing rape, the victims, and the offenders. Many people wonder why I chose this topic, and the reason is because eventually I want to get into criminal psychology and kind of get inside the mind of offenders and see why it is that they do things. According to English law, rape is defined as penetration of the vagina by the penis where ejaculation has taken place, and it also states that it's defined as intercourse with a man and woman that is not his wife by the use of force or threat against her will or her consent. Many victims of rape not only go through the actual physical act, but afterwards they get physically and mentally traumatized. The severity of it just kind of depends on how the victim reacts to the rape. Many victims, once they are aware that they are being the victim of an assault, they use what is called cognitive assessment, which is that when they realize, that they're getting raped, and they try to see what they can do to get out of it. Some victims will try to fight back. Others will threaten the offender by telling them that their dad or their father, they have somebody that's around and will eventually find them and hurt them just like they did to them. Others will physically try to resist. They'll try to run away or do whatever they can in order not to be the victim of rape. A lot of victims who do fight back, research has shown that it doesn't necessarily cause more trauma. On the other hand, it has actually less effect to them physically. And when a woman is being raped, some will go through what is called atomic immobility, which basically is just when the body gives out. There's no sense of what's going on. Their heartbeat increases, their body temperature increases, and it's as if they're not responding to the act. They're just like a dummy. They have no reactions whatsoever. Research has found that this happens very rarely, but when it does, it is it is connected to more physical. It increases the physical reactions to them. It could lead them to have more physical trauma than a victim who tries to resist. The way that the victims react afterwards has a lot to do with their recovery time. For example, some victims will try to minimize the situation. They'll pretend as if it never happened, or they'll just dismiss it altogether. These type of victims are more likely to stay to themselves and not get any type of professional help. Other victims will try to use cognitive skills. This is when they try to kind of relive the assault and make sense of what happened. They try to think about it and see what they could have done to stop it. They try to forget about the rape. Victims who use this skill, when they try to forget about the rape, they usually sleep a lot or try to stay busy, anything they can possibly do not to realize or to think about what happened. The victims who do this, unfortunately, they have a higher psychological risk, meaning they're more likely to get psychologically affected. They're more likely to have more trouble dealing with it or talking about it. A lot of women will also become irritable. They become nervous, they become depressed. Victims who get irritable and anxious are more likely to have feelings of fear and have a negative attitude. Other victims will go through withdrawal, which they choose to stay inside and have minimal contact with society. Victims who do this also have a lot of depression. They don't see any way of having any other kind of sexual interaction with anybody else. Another common reaction that victims have after they've been raped is they take precautions. They tend to lock their doors, put bars on their windows. If they drink or smoke, they'll stop smoking. They'll watch out who they hang out with, anything they could do that they think might minimize their chances of ever being raped again. Victims who have been sexually assaulted usually they have needs. They have three major needs. The first need they need is to express themselves, their emotions. They need to feel safe, and they also have a need for information. One of the most prominent feelings a victim gets when she is raped is fear. They feel hopeless and they have a sense of loss of control. They need reassurance. This is where counselors come in. It's good for rape counselors or intervention programs to come in the system. They play a very important part in the recovery of the victim. Just the way that they talk to them and the tone of voice can either have a negative or a positive effect on them. Rape victims have, like I said, they feel like they lost control, and it's important for the counselor to address questions that will make them feel as if they gained their control back. It could be such like, if they have two names, what name they want to go by or what it is that they want to do from here on. Just giving them a sense that they have their control back and that they can still make decisions for themselves. The second feeling that victims need once they have been raped is the need to express themselves. They need to express themselves by somebody who is not judgmental. The way they express themselves to a counselor or to whoever, they just need to know that they need to express themselves in any way they feel adequate. For example, if the victim wants to cry, you should just let them cry. Telling the victim not to cry, that everything is going to be okay, is not the best way to go, because when in reality, when somebody has been a victim of rape or sexual assault, things aren't going to be okay. There is a process, and not just physically or mentally, but also legal-wise. It is extremely important for the victims not to feel at fault. They need to know that it's not their fault what happened, and that there was possibly nothing that they could have possibly done to stop the situation or to, like, for example, a lot of victims go through victim blaming. For example, they blame themselves. They think that it's their fault that they have been raped. And counselors need to make them aware that that's not true, that there's nothing that the victim did for her to get raped or to be the victim of sexual assault. Victims also need to have information. They need to know what will happen to them. For example, if they report the rape, they need to be advised that they have to go through the legal system, that they have to be medically checked, they have to go through all types of process. And if they do go through the legal system and they do go ahead and decide to prosecute, they need to be aware that it will be a process and they might have to go to court and they might have to face their offender again. Giving the victim as much information as possible will help and relieve their anxieties. There's also many rape myths that society has come about. For example, people have a social stigma of how a rape happens or who the offender looks like, or there's a certain type of place or certain type of person that only gets raped, and that's what's called rape myths. One of them is women who dress provocatively ask to be raped by leading men on. Another one is that a rapist could be clearly identified, meaning that they have a certain physical appearance and that they're all strangers and they all act by motivations of sexual desire. All these are considered to be rape myths. They also have rape myths that say only the young and the beautiful can get raped, when in reality anybody can. It could be a guy, a child, an elderly, anybody can get raped, not just young women. Research also shows that between 1/3 and 2/3 of sexual assaults occur within the victim's home or in a private setting. Rapes can happen at any given time of the day, anywhere. Many men are said to fantasize about women actually enjoying sexual activities, which confuses them into thinking that the rape is an act of desire versus an act of violence. just like any other crime or felony, rape is also stigmatized to be falsely accused. About 2 to 4% of rape cases are said to be false, which is just the same amount as any other criminal or felony. To me, rape cases to society, and to me, rape myths are just an excuse for the rapist to say that, you know, the reason why they raped the victim. Once a victim is sexually assaulted, she may or he may go through what's called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. In order for for the victim to go through post-traumatic stress disorder, they must have gone through a traumatic experience, the rape being that. They go through somatic symptoms, depression, the way that their family and their friends react to them telling them of the assault has a lot to do on the recovery, and if, you know, she will or will not go through PTSD. Friends and family members have been noted to have more of a positive attitude and a positive reaction to the victim, rather than, you know, counselors or law enforcement agencies. Going through PTSD, the victim has feelings of fear and hopelessness. They may have the symptoms for a month, for a couple of days, for a year. It all varies on the victim and how she, again, reacts to sexual assault. There are many different kinds of rape. For example, there's spousal rape. And spousal rape has a lot of controversy within our nation. Many people believe that that husbands cannot rape their wives. And this is something that has been kind of a topic. There's also stranger rape, and stranger rape has 3 major characteristics: bliss sexual assault, contact sexual assault, and home invasion sexual assault. Bliss sexual assault is when the attacker brutally and rapidly sexually assaults the victim. Contact sexual assault happens when the offender makes contact with the victim and tries to gain her trust. And then there's also home invasion sexual assault, which is obviously when the offender comes into the victim's home and sexually assaults her in her own home. Another type of rape is known as acquaintance rape. Acquaintance rape is defined as forced sexual assault between 2 adults who know each other. These 2 adults may just had one conversation, they may have a couple of conversations, they may even had intimate conversations. One of the major issues with this is trying to establish when it is that the offender and the victim lost that voluntary form of contact, when it is that it went from them having a good time together to the sexual assault. And that's one of the biggest issues that law enforcement have with this kind of rape. Spousal rape, going back to spousal rape, is defined as when there is forced sexual activity between spouses, the female being the female spouse and the husband being the male spouse. Back to English law, when the wife agrees to marry her husband, she's agreeing to all implied activities, meaning that she agrees to have any activities that a married couple does. Once legally married, the wife agrees to give herself to her husband. And this is why society said that once you are married, you can't be raped by your husband. Spousal rape has a lot to do with domestic violence. They say it's just another form of it. A lot of spousal rape happens when domestic violence is involved. It includes assault, abuse, entrapment, and terror as part of the cycle. In this case, the victim is just, like I said, the rape is just another form of abuse. Another kind of rape that exists is gang rape or group rape. which is a sexual assault of the victim performed by 2 or more perpetrators. Usually guys who do this, they usually have some type of bond that will allow them or make them go through this act together. Fraternity brothers are one of the groups that have heard to be doing this. They use alcohol to lower the ambitions of their victims. They believe that victims or females that hang around fraternity brothers secretly want to be raped, and not to be raped, but to be involved in sexual activities with them, so they don't see this as a lack of consent. Rape also happens a lot when the victim or the offender intoxicates the victim. Drug-facilitated rape can happen in various forms. One is the mixture of voluntary and involuntary substance, which is when the victim intoxicates herself but at the same time is given some form of drug that she is unaware of. Then you have voluntary indigestion, which is when the victim intoxicates herself, leaving her more vulnerable to the sexual assault. And then involuntary indigestion, which is when the victim is drugged without her knowing at all. There are 3 main types of rape drugs: GHB, ketamine, and rohypnol. Rohypnol is a sedative that is known for being more potent and more powerful than any other sedative. It is said to be mainly found in dance clubs. The manufacturers of rohypnol are now developing where if it dissolves in the drink, it becomes blue, which will allow the victim to kind of know that her drink has been tampered with. The next one is GSB, which was created in 1990 and is used as an anesthetic. Offenders use this drug because it only stays in the urine for 12 hours and in the bloodstream for 8. The drug lowers the inhibitions of the victims and then and it makes the victim feel an increase of euphoria. Ketamine was also developed in 1960 and it's mainly used as an anesthetic on both humans and animals. Ketamine is very popular with offenders because it produces amnesia and it has similar effects as cocaine. One of the issues with this is that the victims can't remember anything that happened the night before or the assault. This leaves the victim feeling more vulnerable and not just physically abused but mentally as well, since they can't put the pieces of their assault together. It also takes them longer to recover. Excuse me. The offenders are usually said to be a certain type of way, a certain type of characteristic. A lot of people think that offenders are psychologically damaged, which is not necessarily true. Society views rapists as somebody who is always lurking in the dark behind an alley somewhere. And it's important for society to keep an open mind, and that, again, an offender can be anybody. It could happen anywhere, and it can happen to anyone. Sex offenders always commit rapes because of their sexual desires. That's something that society says, and which is not true. There's different kinds of sexual offenders. There's the compensatory type, displaced aggressive type, the sexual aggression diffusion type, and the impulse type. The compensatory rapist is one whose motives are mainly driven by his sexual desire rather than his aggression. The displaced anger rapist, the assault is just an expression of his anger. He has uncontrollable impulses. The main goal of the offender is to humiliate, degrade, and physically harm the victim as much as he possibly can. These offenders commit the rape due to unresolved anger. Most of the time it's usually because they have some kind of unresolved issue with a female person in their lives, so they take out this kind of aggression on other females. A lot of the offenders who've actually been prosecuted don't have any kind of record, felonies or misdemeanors at all. For each type of category of rape, there is a profile that's depicted for the rapist. For example, stranger rape is usually committed by young African men, and the rape is usually interracial. For stranger rape, it's usually more of the low income rapist, and it comes from an unemployed background. When it comes down to where it happens, it usually happens somewhere close to the victim's home or in the victim's home. According to the UCR, the Uniformed Crime Uniform Crime Reporting Agency found that only 1/3 of sexual offenses actually occur between the hours of 6 p.m. and 12 p.m. midnight, and it happens close to the victim's home. This kind of completes my paper. As you can see, rape is an act of violence. It's not an act that's always committed by sexual desire. It's still a heinous crime and considered to be one of the most heinous crimes out there. Not only does the offender physically violate his victim, but mentally as well, and it leaves the victim feeling depressed and fear and with feelings that they can never come back. Victims who have been sexually assaulted are advised to go and talk to counselors. This will help their recovery time. Thank you.